Hey everyone, my name is Larissa and today we will be reviewing AICE International History Chapter 3.1. Let's get right into it. Chapter 3 is about the League of Nations and international relations in the 1930s. So on screen there's a timeline for everything that will be discussed in Chapter 3. You can pause and take a look at it if you want to. So Section 3.1 is about how did the rise of extremism affect international relations. Let's first discuss the impact of the Great Depression on political ideologies. The U.S. economy, which had seemed very strong and influential, collapsed in 1929. American industries depended heavily on exports, producing more than they could actually be sold within the USA. At the same time, the USA practiced protectionism, placing high taxes on imports to protect its own industries. This made it very difficult for other countries to sell goods in the U.S., so they couldn't afford American products. As a result, demand for American goods fell. As investors realized what this meant, they rushed to sell their shares, causing panic on the New York Stock Exchange. By October 29, 1929, known as Black Friday, shares had become worthless. Banks closed, and many Americans lost all their savings. This is what is called the Wall Street crash, and the Great Depression followed, and it affected the whole entire world. As demand fell, production dropped, and many workers lost their jobs. There was no unemployment benefits, so families had to reduce spending, which caused demand to fall even more. This created a cycle that pushed the USA deeper into an economic depression until 1939. Other countries were quickly affected because they depended on American loans. When these loans stopped, Germany's economy collapsed, and it could no longer pay the reparations. This then affected Britain, France, and Italy, which relied on those reparations. As international trade declined, countries faced deflation, unemployment, and social unrest. The threat of a revolution increased in every country, and in these conditions, extremism was able to grow. Many people lost trust in democratic governments and turned to ideologies like communism and fascism. At the same time, middle-class people feared disorder and supported strong governments that could restore stability. Even in countries like Britain, France, and the USA, support for extremist groups increased, although democracy survived. However, in countries like Germany, Japan, and Spain, democracy completely collapsed. This is most clearly seen in the rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany. At first, he seemed a very unlikely leader, but his powerful and emotional speeches attracted support, especially from unemployed people and former soldiers. By 1921, he became the leader of the Nazi Party. Hitler strongly criticized Germany's democratic system, arguing that it created weak governments and allowed the threat of communism to grow. He also claimed that politicians had betrayed Germany by signing the Treaty of Versailles. The Nazis used violence to gain power, and in 1923 they attempted the Munich Putsch, which failed. After this, Germany's economy improved for a time due to American loans and better relations through agreements like the Locarno. After this, Germany's economy improved for a time due to American loans and better relations through agreements like the Locarno Agreement. During this period, support for the Nazis declined. However, after the Wall Street crash, Germany's economy collapsed again, and the unemployment increased. Support for the Nazis grew rapidly. In 1932, they gained 37% of the votes, becoming the largest party, and in January 1933, Hitler became chancellor. Once in power, Hitler quickly grew, removed opposition, and ended democracy, creating a one-party totalitarian state based on nationalism and control. Next, let's discuss the impact of the rise of dictatorships on relations between powers. By 1933, major countries like Germany, Italy, the USSR, and Japan were fully ruled by dictatorships. These governments controlled all aspects of people's lives using propaganda and force, which increased tensions between countries. Hitler's rise caused serious concern across Europe. Germany had improved relations in the 1920s, especially through Locarno and joining the League of Nations, but Hitler made it clear that he wanted to destroy the Treaty of Versailles and restore Germany's power. France was especially concerned, since it had always tried to keep Germany weak for security. Italy was also worried, especially about Germany uniting with Austria. Mussolini even sent troops to the Austrian border in 1934 after the Austrian Chancellor de Fuss was killed by the Nazis. The USSR was also very concerned. As a communist country, it felt isolated and very threatened. Hitler's idea of Lebensraum meant expanding east into Poland and the USSR. Stalin tried to form alliances with Britain and France, but they refused because they feared communism more than Germany. At the same time, Japan became a military dictatorship. Democracy was very weak, and people blamed politicians for economic problems. In 1931, Japan took control of Manchuria, and by 1933, it had left the League of Nations. It later formed the Anti-Comintern Pact with Germany, which Italy joined in 1937. This alliance of aggressive dictatorships increased global tensions. In Italy, Benito Mussolini also changed his approach. Although he had good relations with Britain and France before, economic problems reduced his popularity. He wanted a major success to strengthen his position and was impressed by Hitler's actions. Mussolini shifted towards a more aggressive foreign policy. In 1935, he invaded Abyssinia. In 1936, he formed the Rome-Berlin Axis with Germany, and later the Pact of Steel in 1939. These actions made it clear that Italy and Germany were preparing for war. Like in Germany and Japan, democracy in Spain also weakened because of the Great Depression. Spain had been ruled by King Alfonso VIII, I think, under a constitutional monarchy. But this system was unstable because there had been many different political groups with completely different aims. These political groups in Spain included monarchists, liberals, socialists, communists, anarchists, and separatists. Because of these divisions, it became almost impossible to form a stable government. In 1923, Primo de Rivera led a military coup and became dictator with support from the king. However, during the Great Depression, he lost support and resigned. Spain became very unstable again, and in 1931, the king abdicated and Spain became a republic. This led to political chaos. Right-wing groups formed CIDA, which left-wing groups formed the Popular Front. Violence increased and government struggled to maintain control. In July 1936, in July 1936, a right-wing leader, Calvo Sotelo, was killed, which triggered a military revolt. General Francisco Franco took control and Spain's civil war began. However, the war Spain was divided between nationalists led by Franco and Republicans. The war lasted 3 years, and by 1939, Franco won and established a dictatorship. However, the war quickly became very international. Germany and Italy supported Franco, while the USSR supported the Republicans. Britain and France chose non-intervention, trying to avoid a larger war, but Germany and Italy completely ignored this. By the end of 1936, the war had become a conflict between fascism and communism. Germany used the war to test its military strength and support Italy. Italy used it for propaganda and power. The USSR supported the Republicans, but only enough to keep the war going, not to actually win. Eventually, Republicans weakened and Franco gained full control. He established a dictatorship similar in some ways to fascist states, although Spain stayed out of World War II. Finally, let's discuss aims and impact of Hitler's expansionist policies. Did you actually think we were moving on without testing you? No. Which of the following is not one of Spain's political parties? Fascists, socialists, monarchists, anarchists. The correct answer is fascists. Yeah, you got that right, didn't you? You better. Finally, we can talk about Hitler's expansionist policies. His aims were to end the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild Germany's military, unite German-speaking people, and expand territory to Lebensraum. In 1935, the Saar region returned to Germany after a vote, which Hitler used for propaganda. He then began rearmament, reintroducing conscription, and building up the Army, Navy, and Air Force, clearly breaking the Treaty of Versailles. Britain, France, and Italy formed the Stresa Front to stop him, but it failed, because it was weak and very unclear. Britain even signed the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, allowing Germany to expand its navy. In 1936, Hitler sent troops into the Rhineland. Britain and France protested but took no action, which only encouraged him. In 1938, Hitler achieved Anschluss, uniting Germany and Austria. Again, no one stopped him. He then targeted the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. At the Munich conference, Britain and France agreed to give him the territory to avoid war. This was a clear show of appeasement, which you will later learn fully failed. However, in 1939, Hitler took over the rest of Czechoslovakia. Again, appeasement completely failed. He then turned to Poland, demanding territory. When Poland fully refused, Germany invaded on September 1st, 1939, starting World War II. Thank you for watching. This does conclude our summary of Chapter 3.1 for AICE International History. I wish you the best of luck with all your studies.